Maathrey, namaha, with the divine blessings of our Mother Divine Lalita Mahatripurasundari and Father Divine Lord Mahadeva. Today, celebrating the Varaha Jayanthi, which is tomorrow, a day before the Vinayaka Chavathi, we celebrate the Varaha Jayanthi. This is basically on the Tritiya Sukla Pakshami of Bhadrapada Masam. Vinayaka Chavathi as it's celebrated on the Chavathi. So today we'll make a brief attempt to understand the connection between Ganesha and his favorite maternal uncle Vishnu. And again, why Vishnu shares the day before Vinayaka Chavathi Tithi, though these happened at different episodes of time, separated by aeons. But the reason the proximity of these two tithis, Vinayaka Chavathi being a day after the Varaha Jayanthi, has a very significant importance and a Rahasya Nama Ardham in Lalita Sahasranamam. In Lalita Sahasranamam, when we chant, we always conclude it saying Lalita Rahasya Nama Sahasra Stotram. Why Rahasya Namas? Because there are meanings which will only be understood with the help of an adept guru and or by doing dhyanam that will help us connect the Ashtadasa Puranas, the Veda Vedangas, with the different stories that are hidden behind the names of Lalita Sahasranamam. If we were to talk about Varaha Swami, who is a derived force of the Varahi Mata, Jaya Varahi, Jaya Varahi, Jaya Jaya Varahi is the typical Nama Mantram that anybody can use for Sankirtan of that magnificent power, Varahi Devi, who is the chief commander of the armed forces of Lalita Mahatripurasundari. Now, in the Lalita Sahasranam, we have discussed Kameshwara Mukhaloka Kalpita Shree Ganeshwara, Maha Ganesha Nirbinna Vigna Yandra Prashita, Banda Surendra Nirmukta Sastra Pratyastha Varshini, Karangulina Kotpanna Narayana Dasa Kritihi. That is the flow. So, there came a time where all the soldiers of Lalita Mahatripurasundari who were being commanded by the Varahi Devi suddenly felt very lazy. They lost the enthusiasm to fight against the Bandasura Senas, and therefore they have questioned their commander Varahi Devi on why they should fight. We will talk about the Vigna Yantram and the characters of that Vigna Yantram that are typically there in most of the humans, and by praying to Lord Ganesha, those features that cause Vignas will be eliminated. Now, going back to the war of Bandasura with Lalita Mahatripurasundari, both the Varahi Devi and Raja Matangi did not know what was going on when all the armed forces of Lalita Mahatripurasundari lost their enthusiasm to fight. So they approached Lalita Mahatripurasundari and said, "Oh Mother, though all of us are behind the Jwala Malini is nothing but the firewall that was protecting all the armed forces of Mother Divine Lalita Mahatripurasundari's soldiers and senas. In spite of they being behind a wall made of fire and an inferno, something has changed which is causing all the soldiers to lack enthusiasm, and they are challenging and questioning the command of Varahi Devi." Mother Goddess Lalita smiled and she looked at her husband Kameshwara, Mahakameshwara, and that's when Kameshwara Mukhaloka Kalpita Shree Ganeshwara, the Maha Ganesha, is born, who went and eliminated the Vigna Yantra that was planted by Bandasura's brother Vishukra. And then Once that Vigna Yantram was uprooted and broken down into pieces, the armed forces became enthusiastic again, and they felt as if a spell was broken and they came out of a spell, a dark spell, which was indeed the fact. The Vigna Yantram was making them lose their enthusiasm and causing them obstacles with kliba, essentially lack of enthusiasm, laziness, questioning the command, questioning the good, so on and so forth, which we'll discuss in another episode. But after this happened, ಕಾಮೇಶ್ವರ ಮುಖಾಲೋಕ ಕಲ್ಪಿತ ಶ್ರೀ ಗಣೇಶ್ವರ ಮಹಾ ಗಣೇಶ ನಿರ್ಭಿನ್ನ ವಿಘ್ನಂದ್ರ ಪ್ರಚಿತ ಬಂಡಾ ಸುರೇಂದ್ರ ನಿರ್ಮುಕ್ತ ಶಸ್ತ್ರ ಪ್ರತ್ಯಸ ವರ್ಷಿಣಿ ಕರ ಅಂಗುಳಿ ನಕೋತ್ಪನ್ನ ನಾರಾಯಣ ದಸಾಕೃತಿ. After Ganesha broke the Vigna Yantram, Bandasura started using various weapons. That's when Mother created the Vishnu Dasa avatars from the nails on the fingers. Karanguli Nakotpanna Narayana Dasakritihi. Now, the first avataram is the Matsya avataram, the second avataram is the Kurma avataram. The third avataram, Varahi, derived Varaha avataram, which essentially was uprooting the Asuri Shakti that Hiranyaksha was spreading. What was Hiranyaksha doing? Hiranyaksha was causing the worlds to be flooded in an ocean of ignorance, and therefore Bhumi was inundated in that great flood. That's when the Varaha Swami, who was born from the Varahi Shakti of Lalita Mahatripur Sundari, went in search of Bhumi to find the true status. For example, if I forget who I am and get lost in this Maya world, illusionary world, then I need to rediscover myself. That rediscovering oneself is the process which the Varahi Shakti or the Varaha Shakti helps us in finding our own land below the feet. Essentially means finding our foundations. When this was done by the Varaha Swami and given the extreme sensitive sniffing capability that Varaha Swami is blessed with, Kirata Varahi, which is very, very famous as the wild boar because of the sniffing capability. And this Varaha Swami helped by finding the true status of earth in the inundated flood, and when he raised Mother Goddess Earth on the tusks, Jagadguru Adishankaracharya chants in the Saundar Lahari, Avidyanam Antastimirahiradvipanagari Jadanam Chaitanyasthavaka Makaranda Shrutijari Daridranam Chintamani Gunanika Janmajalado Nimagnanam Damshtra Muraripu Varahasya Bhavati. Muraripu Varahasya Bhavati, the one who killed Mura, essentially Vishnu, the way he lifted Mother Goddess Earth in his Varaha Avataram. Similarly, O Mother Goddess, lift me up from this inundated flood of avidya and ignorance. When Mother was raised by the tusks of the great Varahi Shakti Varaha Avataram of Mahavishnu, they were blessed with Naraka. Naraka was a great devotee, but because of the bad friends, he became Narakasura. That is a story we have discussed in the past, and again we'll briefly discuss in the future. But today, celebrating this Varahi derived force of Varaha Avataram and Varaha Jayanthi, tomorrow, a day before Vinayaka Chavathi, I'm being reminded of this very powerful Bhudevi Krita Varaha Stotram, which I'm chanting probably after 2 decades or so. Let me try to recall. It goes as Namaste Deva Devesha Varaha Vadanachyuta Kshira Sagara Sankasa Vajrashanga Mahabhuja Aneka Divyabarna Yagnusutra Virajita Aruna Arunambadara Divyaratna Vibhushita Udyad Banu Pratikasha Padapadma Namo Namaha Balachandraba Damshtraga Mahabhala Parakramaha Divya Chandana Neptanga Tapta Kanchana Kundala Indra Nila Mani Jyoti Hemangada Vibhushita Vajradamstragra Nirbinna Hiranyaksha Mahabala Pundarika Abhiramaksha Samaswana Manohara Shruti Simanta Bhushatma Sarvatmancha Vikramaha Chaturanasham. The last line, as I recall, something goes, it goes Sarva Vidya Mayakara Shabdatita Namo Namaha Ananda Vigrahananta Kala Kala Namo Namaha. This is the slokam that Bhudevi chanted in praise of that great Varaha Swami who helped by rescuing her. Those who chant this, my paternal grandmother who taught me this a long time ago, would tell that whoever chants this slokam and listens to this would also be lifted like a crane would lift things that are stuck in mud. Similarly, we who are stuck in the mud of samsara will also be elevated by the Varaha Swami, therefore helping us identify our true self and walking our spiritual path with the help of the divine direction. This is a brief attempt at describing that great Varaha Avataram. Varaha Swami and Bhudevi are the father and mother of Narakasura, and this Narakasura gets killed by Satyabhama, who is again the Bhudevi Avataram, and Krishna, who is again the Vishnu Avataram, because Naraka, when he becomes Asura, in the Deepavali story we discussed, he gets cursed by his mother, that only his mother will be able to kill him, and therefore Bhudevi is reborn as Satyabhama during Krishna Avataram time, and Vishnumurti as Krishna Avataram, bringing an end to Naraka, who was born to Sura Dampatas, but became Asura because of the friends he chose. So, tell me your friends, I'll tell you what you are. This is a brief offering, and also the reason this tithi is adjacent to Vinayaka Chavathi is our favorite Vinayaka Shlokam. Shree Kanto Matuloyasya Janani Sarva Mangala Janakaha Shankaro Mahadeva Tvam Vande Gajananam. This is one of the famous and powerful Vinayaka Shlokas that starts with Shree Kanto Matuloyasya. Your maternal uncle is Vishnu, and your mother Janani Sarva Mangala. Your mother is the repository of Sarva Mangalas. Janakaha Shankaro Mahadeva. Your father is the treasure of all the auspiciousness. Tvam Vande Gajananam. You are blessed with the face of an elephant. Now, the Varahi Shakti, which did not realize the black spell of Vishukra, when saw the Ganesha dispelling the Vigna Yantram, Varahi Devi bowed down to Ganesha and asked him for a boon. Then immediately Ganesha bowed down and said, "O mother, you are a derived force of my mother, so you should not bow down to me. Rather, I should bow down to you. And from your Amsa, a great Vishnu Avataram will be born. And right next to that adjacent Tithi, my birth will be celebrated. Given your humbleness in spite of your strength to celebrate that Varaha Jayanti from the Bandasura and Lalita Tripur Sundari's war, along with the Varahi Devi's great might, her humbleness is what gets celebrated during Varaha Jayanti, being right adjacent to Vinayaka Chavati. Stay blessed, spread the bliss around. Shree maathrey, namaha.